In ancient history, there are a lot of mysteries, and one of the most famous ones is ancient Egypt, a civilization that started around the Nile River around 5,000 years ago. Even though there's a lot of sayings and theories about ancient Egypt, but nobody really knows the true history of ancient Egypt. A lot of historians believe that ancient Egypt started around the Bronze Age, and that's around 5,000 years ago. But this is still a theory, and it could be much older than that. The most unsolved mystery of ancient Egypt are these pyramids. Nobody can be 100% certain who built these and when it was built. A lot of historians believe that these structures were made 2560 BC, around 4600 years ago. But there isn't strong evidence that proves this year, and there are other historians that believe that it's much older than that, and some of them are wild and say these structures are more than 9,000 years old. Between people and conspiracy theories, there is a lot of things going around. Like, for example, some people say aliens built these, or ancient giants built them that are no longer around. And there are religious beliefs that think ghosts built these structures. And of course, there are those historians that say ancient people were civilized much longer than we think. They went extinct, and there is a lost knowledge in this area. This is just another theory that you can't 100% prove. But at least there's one thing that is 100% true, and that is there was a civilization very advanced around the Nile River 5,000 years ago. A civilization that taught themselves how to farm, and with the help of the Nile River, it helped them become one of the first civilization on planet Earth. The same thing is happening at the same time in ancient Mesopotamia, around the Euphrates and Tigris River. So this shows us anywhere on Earth where there was plenty of water, warm weather, there can be a civilization. Something that you can find around the Nile River and Mesopotamia. But this video is about ancient Egyptian civilization, not Mesopotamian. We just have to say how important these rivers were back then and how important they are to this day. So how is it possible to get these types of civilizations from just farming? Before humans figured out how to farm, the only thing they could do all day is hunt and gather food so they don't stay hungry for that day. And the next day, they do the same thing over and over until they die. And they didn't have time to build a civilization. But fast forward to when we discovered farming, it kind of made food source more stable, where you didn't have to worry about it every day. And that means you had time to do other stuff, like build structures, statues, build cities, have more children and raise the population, figure how to make life easier. And all this led to an ancient civilization where they had the first languages and alphabets. Ancient Egyptian culture was one of a kind, and they were very fascinated by the future. And a lot of things they did was dedicated to the future. Like all the structures they built were made to last, mummifying their kings, so maybe in the future they can wake up and live in the future. They really love to leave messages for the future. Write down that who they were, what they did, and where they were. Unlike other civilizations, ancient Egyptians were a fan of fighting and conquering land, but they did have a strong army. Alongside this army, they had a religious population that had one king, a king called a pharaoh. Another thing that's fascinating about ancient Egypt is that how sophisticated and educated they were, because the structures they built were so well done that it's unbelievable that these things were made thousands of years ago. Look how perfect these statues are made and how uniform it is. Don't even get me started on this mask that's made from gold, and it looks like it came out of a press or a CNC machine. It's so unbelievable that this mask is thousands of years old. So with a civilization like this, what led to its collapse? Was there another civilization that was more advanced than these guys? You have to note that around 3,000 years ago, ancient Egypt was the most advanced and richest civilization in the entire world, and most of that power came from plain old farming. But how did it collapse? Because they kept attacking from Western Asia, civilizations like the Assyrians, Babylonians, Lydians, and many, many more. Just like every other powerful and rich civilization, the population eventually gets lazy. They're having too much of a good time, and that leads to weaken the civilization itself. When generation after generation, life is too good, it finally leads to some people that are extremely weak-minded, and they're no longer looking to advance or learn new things. They just want to hang out and have fun. They're living in heaven and they're not aware on what's going on around them. Like for example, when the Assyrians would attack the Egyptian soldiers would fight with bronze swords, while the Assyrian army would fight with iron swords and defeat them easily. Defeat after defeat causes the population of the ancient civilization of Egypt to be mad at their king, because he couldn't protect them anymore, and that causes a civil war inside the civilization itself. And when you don't pay your taxes to the main government, that's when the empire falls apart. After things like this, they would try to unite once again and unite the ancient civilization that was once there, but they were never successful. The first civilization that completely took over ancient Egypt was the Assyrians around 2700 years ago. Before that, the Assyrians would attack just to steal their goods, and then they would retreat. But this time, they took over and conquered. After this, Egypt wasn't in the hands of Egyptians anymore. The Assyrians stayed there, and they're there until 525 BC, when Cambyses II, son of Cyrus the Great, takes over Egypt and makes himself the pharaoh of Egypt. The Persians stay here for about 250 years, until Alexander shows up and takes over Egypt. He makes himself the pharaoh. But the Egyptians weren't a fan of the Greeks, because they were trying to embed their culture into the Egyptian culture, and the people weren't a fan of that. They even changed the capital to a new city called Alexandria, and that pissed them off even more. You could say the people would cause civil war with the Greeks, and they finally were able to kick them out. This story continues until ancient Rome. The Europeans are once again powerful and take over Egypt. Since they were much more powerful and controlling, the Egyptian people could not say no to their culture anymore, and now Egypt was one of the provinces of Rome. Since the Romans were much more powerful, they even changed the religion of Egyptians to Christianity, and after that, you really couldn't find ancient Egyptian culture in this piece of land anymore. During this time, the Sasanian Persian Empire would fight wars with the Romans and take over Egypt, and for hundreds of years, it would change hands between the Persians and the Romans. This story continues until 640 AD, and the Sasanians and the Romans fight so many wars, which we made a video on, that the Muslims come defeat both of them and take over this area. also taken over Egypt. When they conquered, most of Egypt were Christians, but a lot of the Egyptians converted to Islam, which remained to this day. Ancient Egypt is an extremely important landmark in the world and throughout history, and any powerful civilization that grew up wanted to take over. It started from the Assyrians, all the way to the Germans and allies in World War II. But the most interesting part about ancient Egypt are the structures and art, and a lot of people don't even know what half of these mean, which causes a lot of conspiracy theories to be formed. Aliens, human giants, advanced people that went extinct, or ghosts. In your opinion, which one of these ideas is more logical? Please comment.